I'm Casey Calvert.
I'm Leanna Lovings.
I'm Corey Chase.
I'm Bree Mills, and you're listening to the Adult Time Podcast. What do you think are some of the biggest myths about female sexuality? We talked about the fact that, we're really trying to showcase in authenticity what female sexuality is about. And of course, that is about so many different things. But what rings true to you about your own sexuality as you've kind of come into it? And what do you feel are some of the biggest myths out there about, in particular, female sexuality?
I think the biggest one for me is pleasure doesn't equal orgasm and orgasm doesn't equal pleasure. Mm-hmm. I think that stereotypically in the way that the media has discussed sex, there is this like really heavy connotation that you have to come to enjoy yourself or to be good at sex and vice versa. And I think particularly men get so caught up in making a woman come. And orgasms are great, but there's so many different types of orgasms. And they're not necessarily the big O that everyone sees in media. And I think people need to just take a breath and calm down with that. And I think people also really struggle to talk about, I think people think that they should just know how to make a girl come. And the reality is our bodies are so, even men's bodies vary a lot, but I think with women in particular, there's a special kind of uniqueness to every person and what they need to orgasm and what they need to feel pleasure. And it's just a conversation that should be really easy, but a lot of people struggle to have that conversation, like what makes you turned on and what helps you. So I think they're the biggest myths. I wish people would talk about what their partner wants specifically a little bit more. And I also wish people would just take a breath with orgasm and not panic. Like I've definitely had lovers in the past where they get caught up in the fact that, they don't make me come every single time. And it's like, I don't care. I'm having fun. Still feels great.
Yeah.
Chill. I'm not worried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even when you were saying, like when you were kind of first discovering your own body and pleasing yourself, that even within yourself, there was sort of that like, I need to reach this conclusion and like that frustration. So it's almost like kind of ingrained in all of us, right? Yeah. Especially for women, like there must be this sort of, because we don't physically see an ejaculation, there has to be this sort of, almost performative one that comes out.
This big ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we undo all of that ingrained feeling and start to build back the fact that, self-pleasure does not always equate orgasm?
I think sex education has a lot to speak for the way that people interpret sex in general. I was a part of a discussion back when I first moved here about sex ed and also the space of verification of faces for porn.
Yes.
That Corey Silverstein ran. And I remember doing research on sex ed in America before I came into talk because I only knew the Australian space. And it's crazy how many schools don't even have a sex education program. Apparently only 40% of schools use the curriculum that's recommended to teach sex. And then despite those schools doing it, most of them don't do it well anyway because they don't have the funding. The teachers aren't being paid extra or someone is too nervous to take it on because in America, in particular, the political viewpoints and cultural viewpoints that different, groups of people have is very scary. Yeah. To take on that responsibility of teaching kids about that is a big deal. So I think there needs to be, and I don't know what the answer is. I've said for the longest time I would love to make a website that is holistic and covers sex education in its entirety according to the curriculum. I don't think I've seen a website yet to date that starts from kindergarten, which is what the curriculum actually recommends.
Yeah.
I see them talking to teenagers. I see them talking to kids in that space, but there's nothing that really covers the whole space. Yeah. And when kids are that small, it's not necessarily talking about sex itself. It might just be talking about inappropriate touching, like a stranger cannot touch you in this way. But that's still sex education.
Yeah, absolutely. And it speaks to the whole conversation about like consent and communication and teaching kids when they're very young, their own boundaries, but also to respect other boundaries. Yeah. Which is definitely something that when you're young and you don't have that knowledge or those facets, like, you know, you're just as likely to infringe on someone else's consent without knowledge as it on you. So it definitely is something that I agree, even if it's not in that label, like we need to start educating people on how to communicate from a very early age.
And I think it does have to be a space outside of the education system. Because I don't think it's fair to expect schools to cover that because they just don't have the funding. I also think that although parents should have a big role in this, a lot of parents aren't educated themselves. So you can't expect an uneducated person in that space to know what to teach their kid. Like if they don't know, we can't expect them to teach appropriately. So there needs to be a resource that kind of like helps everyone at every stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, and generational, trauma is very real, right? So you're oftentimes coming off of what your parents and their parents and, you know, your own particular culture have kind of predetermined as the knowledge that you can apply to this subject. And it definitely becomes problematic. Yeah. No, as a parent, I would say that for sure. And also sexuality evolves over time. So like you said, you know, growing up, you know, while you can look back now and sort of identify, oh, you know, this is how I was and this is maybe what led me into who I am today, like sexuality evolves over time.
Yeah.
So I want to hear more about, for you, that kind of dramatic switch from, you know, your life before porn to like kind of the idea of, well, what if I experimented with porn as a means to, you know, explore my sexuality? How did you come to that decision? Because it's one that probably a lot of people wouldn't necessarily go to as their first choice.
Yeah, it was a long choice. I did a lot of research. I looked up what people in the industry had said, both the good and the bad. And I thought about my degree and I looked into the laws as to whether people could discriminate against me in Australia. Like I went deep, I deep dove. But the actual decision itself, I don't know. It was really just like a light bulb moment. Yeah. I just went, fuck it. Whatever. I don't know. I wish it was a lot more complicated than that. I just did my research and then I sat back and went, well, I'm not going to know unless I try it. And I think at that point I was sick of being so sequestered and I wanted to step outside of my box, but I still felt a little socially awkward about doing it. So porn gave me like parameters that I could explore within and then see if I liked it. And then from there, you know, that bled into my personal life in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah.